Okay, hello. Welcome back to our show, My Time with Lynn. I am very pleased to have our first guest with experience in the organization, Joanne Lawler, joining us from Australia. We have a little bit of a time gap we had to navigate, so she's up late, I'm up early. But Joanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll get right into it. We got some time to talk about a lot of things, but uh, take us through for the audience that doesn't know you or your background, but how did you come across the organization?
I guess mine's a bit of a odd, not odd, or more out of the normal. So I guess my mum actually got involved with the LaRouche movement before I did. And for her, it was literally a cold call on the telephone. So my parents have a business, transport business, and the Australian LaRouche movement, the Citizens Electoral Council, was just targeting small business owners, and they happened to call my mum, and she answered the phone. And she's always been someone that's kind of questioned why and this doesn't make sense and what are we doing, and she got involved. And I remember she went to a couple of conferences and things just in Australia, and one time she came home and she goes, "Do you know that the shortest distance between 2 points is not a straight line?" I was like, "Oh my god, my mother's lost it. Like, what? What?" Like, you've gone to a political conference and you're coming home talking about catenary curves. So that kind of got me a little bit intrigued. So, my last couple of years of school, kind of year 11 and 12, I think is when my mum kind of got involved in the LaRouche movement. And then she would have, Fidelio magazines that would be laying around the house, and you kind of have a bit of a flick through. And she started talking about classical music and how important that was for the mind and the development of the mind. And funny enough, when I was studying for, we call it the HSC, your final year 12 exams before you go to what you guys call college, we call it university. Um, sure enough, the way for me to be able to concentrate when I was studying, I would put on mum's classical music.
Uh-huh.
I had no real, I had no real connection to it, but for some reason, if I put that on, I could sit and study for hours without interruption, and I could focus. Um, Anyway, there's stuff, through that, things that happen with the end of school and my HSC and my exam marks and things like that, that just made me kind of not believe in the education system, that it was all a bit of a shambles, didn't really capture what we were learning or whether how well we learned. So I was kind of skeptical of things when I came out of school and got very lost as to what I wanted to do with life. And funny enough, so the CEC needed a accounts administration person, and I was so lost as to what I was going to do with my life. I was like, "Yep, I'll do it. I'm going to pack my bags and move to Melbourne,
Oh, wow.
which is um, 12, 13 hours away from where my family was." And
Oh,
so at
wow.
18 years of age, I packed my bags and moved away from home. Big life shock. But so then I was around the movement, and I was doing just the admin kind of work and banking and different things. And then through that, you kind of were around for a couple of different meetings and stuff. And after about 12 months or so, I can't remember the specifics, but I ended up, yeah, deciding to go to the US to one of the international conferences in
Hmm.
Washington, would have been in Virginia somewhere.
Right.
And that blew me away. That
Okay.
was kind of one of those moments. So between, I think the conferences were generally a 2 or 3 day event.
Right.
You had hundreds of people come together, and then between the different panels, and it was obviously in a big hotel, and you would, I remember Zeke Boyd out in the foyer, building platonic solids out of straws and talking
Okay.
about things. And then somewhere else you could go and there'd be, I can't think of his name, but different people,
Yeah.
talking about different history subjects and things. But I think one of the things that struck me most is that because in the evening, and it's in a hotel and everyone staying in the same hotel, so I remember it was kind of like, hey, we're all going to hang out in such and such's room. I remember going into this room at the hotel, and there was probably, I don't know, the room was packed full of people,
Right.
all young people. Actually, this might have been the next time I went over. I went to a few of the conferences, but I just remember this one point in time where there was all these different conversations going on in the room. And I remember just standing there and like just watching what was going on. And it was just this moment of awe that, oh my God, the conversations that were happening were so just powerful. It was not, yeah, local media, who's the most
Sure.
popular celebrity type crap. It was all these people talking about really profound ideas. And I just remember standing there going, oh my God, who are these people?
Hmm.
And where have they been in my life kind of thing. It was kind of one of those moments where you're like, okay, this is pretty cool. These are the kind of people that I want to associate with and hang out with. And so
100%,
we're in the
especially
midst of that.
young people too, and with a passion for it. It's not because they're being paid or something. It's because they genuinely love it. Similar experience. My first one was in LA, conference there, and yeah, just all the energy around the events, and like, yeah, the lectures are great, but then more of it was like the people and their response, and then yeah, you go to these same very very similar experience, like in some hotel room, and all these 20 somethings talking about classical music and classical art and science, and like why the science you get in university is just a complete shadow of the real story of the discoveries that made those things that filter the way down in the textbook. So that's awesome. Do you remember what year those conferences were? Maybe
I
2000.
think I think the first conference I actually ever went to was around it's 2000,
Okay,
and so it was, I think the first one I went to was actually before the youth movement
sure.
existed, and I think it was somewhere not long after that that the youth movement kind of got launched.
Hmm.
And then I know I went back. I think they happened every 6 months.
It did. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think I went to one. I don't know. I remember then saving my money, and I was like, I'm sending myself back to the next one.
Nice. That's
And
great.
I went back over again, and then yeah, we eventually we ended up we had a couple of youth that joined in Australia. So then our thing would be to kind of bring them over to the US to meet the international movement and know that they're part of something much bigger than just Australia. And
Mhm.
so I remember getting on a plane with just a couple of funny story, a couple of young guys. We get on the plane to come to the US. I'd at least been in the US before. They hadn't. They'd never traveled outside the country. And of course, our plane gets delayed. And
Uh-huh.
so, someone from Leesburg is supposed to come to the airport and pick us up, but we get delayed 24 hours. So we get to the airport, we land in Dallas and in Dallas Airport, and we're trying to like use the payphone to ring someone to see if someone's coming to pick us up. And the guys are freaking out, like, "What are we doing? What are we doing?" I said, "Oh, let's just jump in a cab." And they're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure the cab driver will know where to take us." And I'd never been to Leesburg before, and it was like we'd given him a address, and the guy's like, "I don't really know where that is," and we're driving down the street. And like, "Oh, actually, I've seen that building in a photo. I think
That's
that might be the
hilarious.
office."
That's
So that's how we got there.
it's
Yeah,
pre MapQuest and cell phones and or
that's
smartphones.
right.
You say like, yeah, yeah. There's no guarantee they know
We
where
had
that
nothing.
is.
That's right. We had no one we could call to say that we were here. Couldn't text. You couldn't.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's
the
funny.
days without mobile phones, very different.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, we had a couple Australians in Seattle join us on one of those international exchange kind of things. It was pretty neat to hear about the CEC and all that. It's nice.
mm, mm. And then one of the years that I came over, what did we do? Somehow we had a group of us. There was a few of us, and then we went to Philadelphia.
Okay,
And so we came over for a conference, and then I think went and spent 2 weeks in Philadelphia afterwards. And at the time, they were actually, I think we must have went to LA first, because I think we spent a week might have been over there for a month. I don't know. But I think we spent like a week in the LA office and then
Mhm.
went to Washington for the conference and then spent a couple of weeks in Philly.
Okay.
And it was during that trip that there was a plan in motion for an American to come to Australia and spend some time down there helping us build a youth movement. And of course, it was when I went to Philly, I met Brian. And then somewhere in the midst of that, Brian was the one that Lynn or whoever, I don't know how that decision was actually made, but Brian was the one that was then chosen to travel to Australia for a couple of weeks. And
Sure.
we had a big cadre school, and of course, a little romance formed. And yeah.
Hmm. Nice. You guys were a really
And,
sweet couple, and as fate would have it, and Brian was a really sweet guy. That's
yes. Yes.
well, that's
So
pretty
yeah,
neat.
somewhere in the midst of that, yeah, we started a long distance relationship. And as you have within all organizations, there's always issues and challenges and stuff. And I was trying to build a youth movement in Australia, but then running into certain obstacles within the way that the local or whatever already functioned.
Sure.
And being young, and things, I made a really irrational decision to jump on a plane and move to the United States.
Well, I
Which
mean,
I think freaked a lot of people out, including Brian, probably myself, because I was kind of like, oh, I'm going to go to the US. And 10 days later, I was actually there. So it
wow.
was very rash, but
Sure, but I mean,
it's turned out.
I would imagine one of the most substantial decisions of your life. One of the most probably life-changing. Just that move alone, right? A little less choosing to embark on that mission with Brian, of course, but then to help set up the youth movement, and also to get away from some of those you might call them like institutional structures or institutional, friction, right? And I think U.S. the U.S. local offices in the U.S. for the youth movement had that same kind of thing, I think, right? Even thinking you were saying, going to LA first and then DC. A lot of the because it's like 2002-ish where the youth movement was like more officially launched. You had some young people hanging around, but then I think there was just, I mean, I'm sure it was probably Lynn, but I think also Harley and Phil and others, but the idea like they sort of felt that potential around with the youth, right? And some of
Mm,
those, I mean, it's like especially after 9/11 too in the US, and globally, but they
mm,
felt that. So then they would, I think they would want people to come. Like LA was the center initially. It was like the center of the youth organization, and they wanted people to come through there, kind of see how it's sort of fermenting, and then or fomenting, and then yeah, going into DC makes sense too. That's pretty neat. And so then, okay, so that's a while, and that's partially why I wanted you on too, right? Because well, one, because you're brave enough to do this and show people that it's really not that bad. We're really just talking about some of our experiences,
that's
right?
right.
Yeah,
Talking about our life.
yeah. But then also that you would have had a unique perspective coming from a different international, branch of what we were doing into the U.S. And you kind of could see both worlds and see, some of the potentials and some of the pitfalls of it. So okay, so
Mm,
then but that's awesome though. So then you were in the Philly office for a bit.
mm. Yeah, we're in the Philly office, and I think I came in. Um, well, actually, I think that was part of it. There was the Mayor Street campaign. I don't really remember the background of it, but I know there was a large contingent of people in Philadelphia, a lot of youth. But I think Philadelphia had started to really grow as a youth local. I know Steve Douglas and those guys played a pretty key role in trying to recruit a bunch of young people, and you had a New York contingent and Baltimore.
Hmm.
So I think the Baltimore and New York guys all kind of came into Philadelphia. So when I came in, it was kind of on the tail end of that, and there was some other campaign. Well, it would have been leading into the election. Because
Well, I think yeah, I remember.
I moved to the US in 2004.
Okay.
Started March 2004, I think, is when I actually moved, and so then that was the year of the Democratic convention in Boston.
That's right.
So
June
yeah,
2004. It was like right then.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
remember
that was
yeah,
go.
I know you guys have stories of that one too. And it is, yeah, you said the other day that the convention, like, oh, that's right. It was a big deal for us. But the street campaign, it was, yeah, something to do with the mayor of Philadelphia. I just remember we had like great shots of the youth with like placards walking down the street, and well, they'd use it everywhere. Like every single pamphlet we created, it's like, oh, you look at this, and it was inspiring because like you didn't see that kind of thing, you know. If at that point, and even maybe somewhat to this day, if you saw young people being political, it was like more of a protest thing, like we're against this or something. But for to see people saying we want this, this is what we want,
Mm,
and it was obviously with the background of we're talking about the classical education, and you talk to these young people, and there was always rough around the edges, but like you got some idea that they had some semblance of intellect and passion for concepts beyond just I'm against this. It's like, no, we want
mm.
to create a society of classical education. Like that's okay. I wasn't expecting to hear that from a 21-year-old. But
That's right, and that was it because it's very easy to say that you don't like something or this is never going to work or this is wrong, this sucks. But when you then say to people, okay, well, what are you proposing instead? And
mhm,
I remember a lot of campaigning and stuff that we did and rallies and things, and we would obviously go to protest because you would find people that were thinking a bit more than your average citizen. But yeah, same thing. You would ask people, well, what is it that you are proposing? And a lot of people kind of like, what do you mean? Like, you
just get
mean
this
I can
guy out.
actually, you mean I
Yeah,
can actually suggest that I actually want something? And that was, I think, one of the key things with Lyn and everything that he was doing was that he wasn't there just to attack a system or just, spread negativity. It was about the positive things, the best of American history, the best of European history, the best, bringing that to the surface, the things that aren't taught in school or aren't pushed in regular culture, trying to bring those to the surface so that people had something to go out there and fight for
hmm
as opposed to fight against something. So it was obviously we did campaign against quite a few
Sure.
things.
Yeah, for it. 100%. 100%.
But we always had a proposal, right? We were the ones out there talking about Glass-Steagall. It was, Lyn was obviously the one talking about the global financial crisis. And,
Mhm.
one of the things, just a funny difference between the US and Australia is that, in Australia, they just call it the GFC, global financial crisis. It happened. It was a thing.
Right.
Everybody knows it happened. But in the US, it was never really admitted that there was a global financial
Sure.
collapse.
Sure.
It kind of never really happened, or we came close, but we bailed out. But whereas in Australia, people just talk about the GFC, and that's it's just a marker in
Sure.
time that happened, and you would see that. I know when I used to come home and visit, or I'd come home and then I'd stay for a few weeks and work with the CEC while I was home, and the opinions people would have around, well, yellow cake uranium and the wars on Iraq and things. And
Sure.
the story had changed in the US, but it was still several months later before people caught on in Australia, kind of thing, or just how the media controls the different stories. But
Sure.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. You just kind of a couple of things you said reminded me of you're talking about your mom bringing classical music into the house and Lyn pushing the positive. I don't know if you remember if you were around, but LA had this idea, which I love, called the Classical Music Challenge. Do you remember hearing about that or anything? It
No.
would just be like if you had a young person coming into your office, and if you're a youth organizing, then you say, okay, hey, can you handle the Classical Music Challenge, which is just for 30 days, only listen to classical music, nothing else, and just see how your mind changes. And actually, like it was all positives. Like a lot of those people wouldn't join necessarily, but you still like could show them in a little way, like, hey, just don't take my word for it. Just do it yourself. Just, nothing's, I don't know. We're not going to brainwash you. It's just, it's just, we're trying to show you a different way that your mind could work with that kind of challenge, but kind of fun
Mm.
anyway. Okay,
Mm.
so March 2004, then you were at the June Boston convention. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I think because I've been trying to think back to some of the timelines. So I think before that, so there was no, I think there was a local in Washington D.C., a very small contingent, but one day a week we would have essentially a day of action in Washington D.C. So the guys from New York, Philadelphia, it was Baltimore group. We would all go to DC, spend the day in the city, and then we'd all go home. So it was usually, I think it was about a 3 hour drive or something from Philadelphia down there. So we were doing all these trips back and forth down to DC. And of course, Lyn was running for president.
Mhm.
You know, he was on the, well, I guess it was LaRouche in 2004 campaign, I think is what it was called.
Yep.
So LaRouche was running as a candidate, and he had done a lot of work with the Congressional Black Caucus.
Mhm.
Actually, you know what? This was no, this is before I moved to America.
Okay.
This is a funny story. You'll like this story.
Mhm.
This is probably one of the things that from where Brian and my spark kind of came from. But
Okay.
so yeah, it was when there's a group of Australians when we were over here, and we spent that time in Philly. So we'd gone down, we'd done a deployment down in Washington D.C., and the Congressional Black Caucus was holding, I think, the first Democratic debate in Baltimore.
Okay.
And so there was this glimmer of hope that they were actually going to let Lyn participate in the
That's right.
debate.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
And they changed their mind at the last minute. And
Mhm.
I remember going to, so we all showed up to that Democratic debate. And there was probably, I don't know, I want to say there was like 20 or 30 of us. There was people everywhere. It was at some big, I don't know whether it was at a university or I don't know what it was, but no one had a ticket to get in out of the LaRouche movement. So you had all these people flooding in. Everyone had to have a ticket. And I just remember, being an Australian, I was on foreign soil, and I'm just watching this youth movement work its magic, right?
Yeah.
So no one had a ticket, and everyone's like, "How are we going to get in there? How are we going to get in there? We need to intervene on this." These guys, it's the Congressional Black Caucus. They've been working with Lyn, and then they didn't have the balls to actually put him on stage and have a genuine debate.
Yeah.
And somehow, I think there was about 10 people got in to the event. Like, just they managed to get tickets. Like,
We'd
they just
always
went and worked the crowd and
we would always find a
get in
way in.
anywhere. That's wild.
I can think of
And the
like
funny
go ahead, sorry, keep going.
I'm sure there's plenty of other stories, but they no one knew whether anyone else got in. So everyone that went in thought they were the only person that went in there, right? So they're like, well, I'm the only one in here. I've got to do something.
Yep.
So, this was a debate where I think every 10 minutes somebody stood up and intervened, and I'm outside, and next thing you see someone getting dragged out by the cops and thrown in the cop car, and like,
Yep.
oh, there goes Delante. And then like the next one, you're like, oh, there goes Aaron. And then like,
Yep.
oh, there goes Brian. And so the funniest part is that us being Australians, and we're in a van, and we were in Baltimore and had to get back to Philly. Well, our drivers ended up in jail for the night, didn't they? So they all went and spent the night in jail. And of course, Brian was one of them. And just I was very impressed by everyone's ability to just go in there and stand up in the middle of this event and interject. I think it was like Lieberman and
Oh yeah.
whoever else were candidates at the time.
John Kerry and John Edwards and those guys. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
So I
That's
remember us Australians having to drive these because a lot of Americans didn't have licenses. I'm like, why do young people not have a driver's license?
sure.
So we're trying to drive home in the middle of the night, in a country we don't know on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah.
So I remember being delirious and trying to drive. I'm like, I've got to stop. This is not going to end well.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah.
The-
Then we had to, I think someone had to go and get them out of jail the next day, or they were released, but they were all, stuck in Baltimore. So
right.
we'd all left and gone home.
That's hilarious. No, I mean, there's few events I can think of that we weren't able to get into. I mean, we would always get into those events,
Mm.
whatever way we would. There was an event in actually right around that time, June 2004, I think. Yeah. Because we were going against Al Gore. It might have been a year later or something, but I just remember it was in June. And there's a place called the Seattle Town Hall. But man, we had people like anytime we go to a Democratic Party event or a political event, we just swipe credentials. Like if anyone was like, if there was a little name tag left on a table that was in our pocket, right? And we would like do forgeries of them. We would just like use primitive Photoshop and make copies or whatever, just whatever looked real, and then make little lanyards. And then if you just wore those, anyone would just assume that you're supposed to be where you were, right? So that was a common way.
Yep.
In this event I'm thinking of, there was like a door, a table like for people to sign in, whatever, and we just had people walk right past when people were like they're filling out the forms. We
Funny.
just walk right past them. I won't say their names, but two young females that worked with us. They went to the ground floor and they saw there was like caterers in the kitchen, and they just knocked on the door. The caterer like opens up the window and they say, "Hey, can we just sneak through here? We're trying to break up this event." And I said, "Sure, come on in." And so they just crawl through the window. And then they had we were doing the joke was we're making fun of Al Gore because of his global warming BS. And
Yeah.
they had they had backpacks with robes in it, and they sat down it was a big auditorium. They put on the robes like in their seats, and then stood up and started doing the Algorian chanting we used to do, like we emit the CO2, and like they hit themselves with their books, kind of like a Monty Python joke. But you remind me, like people don't realize, and that's a hilarious story. I remember glimmers of that story where you were saying where everyone thought they were the only person that got in, so they all felt the obligation. And that's a pressure that you cannot replicate unless you're in that. Like if you're in a packed auditorium and you in your mind have to stand up and like even just to say something, right? It's like embarrassing and like, but then to like attack,
Palms are sweaty.
yeah.
And
Oh God, like I've had to do it. I'm much more introverted. That was not a favorite part of mine at all. But it's fun afterwards, there's like bragging rights and stuff. But yeah, for all of them to do that is hilarious. That's great.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was a good event.
Hmm.
And then somewhere after that is when we went to Boston for the convention.
Yeah.
And there was actually I was trying to find stuff online, and I actually found an article that reminded me of a story that I'd completely forgotten about.
Okay.
Which is that so we had, I don't know, it was probably around 100 people that went to Boston for the convention.
Mostly youth.
But yeah, there was the hotel that had been booked, but they canceled the booking like the day before.
Yeah.
And so the article I found was talking about that and the fact that it was we were listed as a security threat.
Yep. Of course.
For the Boston Convention. And then because the Democratic National Committee had some kind of contract with so many hotels, then those hotels fell under that contract, and the Democratic National Committee was able to force us out. So I remember we stayed in some youth hostel thing, but I remember like a bunch of our stuff got stolen
Hmm.
out of the rooms and things. Like
Yep.
it was just we were very welcome in Boston, put it
I
that way.
know. The DNC has always been corrupt.
Yeah. But there was another I can't remember whether we had many people actually get inside at the convention, but I know we had a pretty big impact. I know we had a platform that Lyn had written, and I just remember there'd be massive queues to get into the convention each evening, and we had a chorus, we had multiple choruses just kind of set up along the line and big banners, and
Mm-hmm.
you just walk up and down the line singing, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. Boston Convention was a great time because the network of trains and trolleys, and we just sang everywhere we went in Boston. We had all kinds of, you know, I can't even remember what canons and stuff we were singing, but we would have rewritten the lyrics. And
Yep.
yeah, I just remember getting that, what you had described. I think that was on your Facebook post of, you get into the train, the doors close, and bam, we just start, or in canon, because one group starts at
Yep.
one end of the train, and then all of a sudden this other group starts, and then everyone's kind of sitting there. It's like what you see now with the what do they call it, the mob,
Flash mobs.
yeah, the flash mobs and things. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah, we did that years ago.
I know. I'm
um,
pretty sure I don't know like if they ripped it off from us. Not that I mean it's a funny idea. It's more for entertainment, I guess. But no, we definitely were doing it way before they did anything like that.
Although I
Then
guess it's probably the internet has made it more of a, we didn't have the
sure,
ability to film what we were doing and post it online,
sure.
in the instant that we were doing it. So
Yeah. No,
that's
that's
probably helped.
yeah, I know. Yeah, we it would have been way better. It would have been way more powerful if we had that. And even we did have it was on the old WLYM page, I think, that we posted some videos and it was like Sky organizing somebody. And it was like across the street, but somehow we had the mic'd up or something. And then I mean, not to like that my name. So yeah, just different organizers that were there, kind of like notable organizers, and just really brief interactions. It was really exciting. And then of course, like the older part of the organization, like they would use it for, fundraising and everything. Because like look at what
Mm.
kind of impact we're having. And that article too, right? Like the Democrats definitely did not know what to do with that with us. Like, I mean, this is '04, so Bush Jr. is running for re-election. The Democrats really had no good candidate at all outside of Lynn. I mean, they're all like, if you go back, those debates are awful. They're trying to look like they're stronger Republicans, whatever. At the time, yeah, Kerry, that was the Howard Dean scream year, if you remember.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I
Howard
do
Dean was
remember
a front runner until they decided he wasn't. Yeah, DNC trying to thwart us. That corruption is old corruption in the DNC, and but part of it was that they more on the idea they might just be ignorant. They did not know what to do with the fact that you had young people excited to be involved in
that.
politics and excited to be, bringing this classical beauty into the sphere, right? And then I think it was Delonte had a famous interaction with Terry McAuliffe, the then head of the DNC, and just call like because they wanted to come up to this event. Oh, come up, we have this thing. The youth are here, and he didn't know. We kind of tricked him into coming up, and then we used to have. I'm sure the picture exists somewhere, but it's him like he looks completely caught off guard. We were just like, hey, what are you gonna do? Why aren't you including Lynn? Oh, so we use that in all our magazines and stuff. That
That's
was
right, because they're like, oh, there's all these young people, and of course to them that's like, a
gold.
good sign, right? If you have all these young people, but then they realize, well, hang on, these guys they're all here because of LaRouche.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, there was no other, you did not see young people involved in politics at that time, especially in the ways we were. So it was to them, they were trying to, they thought they could like buy us off or, convince
Mm.
us to whatever. And like, they quickly learned, like, no, sorry. Like, whatever you think about us, we have integrity. You're like, we're not going to just do it because of for money or for some other, or for, we want some position. We're doing this because we believe in what we believe in. So,
That's
right or
right.
wrong. So,
I remember the one of the banners, obviously there's a photo of it, but yeah, you exclude us, we include you, I
right.
think was the slogan we went with to the convention,
Hmm.
knowing that it was, yeah, you guys have deliberately tried to exclude Lynn, exclude the youth movement, but hey, we're here anyway, and we're going to include you in our plan, and
Sure.
here's what we propose.
Yeah. Yep.
And then it was out of Boston that there was some kind of press conference, don't know whether there was a couple of Congress members or something that actually spoke at the press conference with a couple of, I think, youth members. I don't know whether Lyn was at that particular press conference or not, but there was some other, like a couple of key events that happened on the side. And at the end of the week, because I think it was a week that we were up there, it was at the end of that Lyn launched the LaRouche PAC, the Political Action Committee, and then basically endorsed John Kerry. And then we started campaigning.
Right. That one was tough.
We just went from one campaign to the next, but
yeah, and there's never a break. Yeah, I remember the John Kerry thing because it was like, man, this guy sucks. But like, it was just such a like, oh, we have to support this guy. And like it was always that like, okay, I mean, it's kind of gone through different iterations through different, different presidencies, right, left, or whatever. It's like, well, maybe this guy, we can get him to do this, or maybe it's better for world development, or, the potential for us to develop these economic plans, or whatever it is, I mean, Trump the other day was like talking about basically like a NWAPA plan. I was like, okay, that's kind of, wasn't expecting to hear that from that guy, but okay. Hey, it should happen. Yeah.
That's right. I guess that's it. You're constantly just putting the ideas out there, and people will pick up little pieces here and there and kind of run with it. And that's it. I don't think, it wasn't, Lyn didn't ever have the expectation, I guess, necessarily that he would become president. Obviously that would have been his preference, but it was a campaign to be able to be out there and talking about these ideas and making sure these things were part of the actual discussion. And obviously, I think, obviously a big thing was that Lyn genuinely saw that the financial crash was coming. The economy is not stable. You can't, obviously it's triple curve and all that kind of stuff. You can't sustain life on speculation, and you need a real physical economy. And their ideas that they're not new, then they're not going to go away either. It's kind of reality of the science, the principles of the universe kind of thing. So
yeah, and what we alluded to with like there. Sorry, what we alluded to with like the DNC being corrupt as long as I've been involved in anything political, but you wouldn't think that some political party would be concerned about canceling hotel reservations for a group of young people, right? And history show that we were trying to disrupt it, but we weren't trying to like harm anybody or like we're just trying to like disrupt it with ideas. But then I mean, you see it with how they treated Bernie Sanders, Bobby Kennedy, Andrew Yang, like that. There's no limit to what those corrupt political groups will do to shut down somebody. Like you're like, that's made up. That's a movie plot. Like no one actually does that. I say that to reference what you were saying about like, okay, Lyn becoming president. Like there's so many obstacles. There's just like, there's no way you'll have any kind of honest chance to even debate or to even like let your ideas be presented to a public. There's no possible way. And it was funny, you remind me of like the Black Hawks too. Like Lyn had a huge support from, I mean, the civil rights movement after the death of Dr. King kind of split into two factions. And one of them was like the Al Sharpton, more public, and what's the other guy's name? I forget his name. Rainbow Coalition guy, Al Sharpton, and I forget. I'm not going to remember on this call. But we were the other side, Amelia Boynton Robinson, those people, and I think her idea, her image of the circle, you drew a circle and kept us out, and we drew a circle and brought you in. That like I think that was an inspiration to that slogan you were just talking about before, right? You exclude us, we include you. And that was more of what we were all about. It was more of that civil rights, uplifting the spirit of man, right? And so that like, so if you're a Democratic Party trying to appear stronger militarily than George Bush Jr., we're not going to make sense to you. We're like, what? And that's, I mean, God, Yeah, sorry, you're dredging up a lot of old like this party has been so corrupt and so off for so long. Yeah, I'm not trying to make it anything about current politics, just about like that's my experience, right? Because
Yeah.
we were independent, but we were more democratic for sure in terms of like FDR and I think the Republicans the last 8 years have kind of claimed that just because
Mm.
people left the forgotten man, they left him in the dust. But anyway, this is a
Mm.
political tangent in a show about a political movement. Um, okay, so we're like 2004-ish. Then you're working more with Philly, with the youth.
Well, we then ended up in Ohio.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So the Philly local then went to the Ohio campaign. That
Right.
was a rough period.
Yeah.
It became good, sort of,
Yeah.
kinda. We were doing
It's kind of like
crazy
nomadic,
drives,
kind of
and
nomadic, right? The
yeah, it was
nodes.
very nomadic,
Yeah.
very nomadic. Well, yeah, we traveled a lot. We moved around a lot, and yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like it was only a couple of weeks after coming back from the Boston convention that we were off to Ohio. There wasn't a lot of time in between,
Right.
and we went out. We were doing wild things. So we were campaigning in Ohio, but someone had a house. Um, oh gosh, somewhere there in Pennsylvania.
There's,
God, I need a map.
I'm sure, yeah. I'm sure there's a
What's the city
thousand.
closest to um
So Lancaster,
oh,
Harrisburg,
Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh. Okay, Pittsburgh. Yeah,
I think
sure.
it's out in Pittsburgh. I think there's a house in Pittsburgh. So then we were staying in Pittsburgh and then driving into Ohio like 2 hours each morning or something like that. And we did that for several weeks. And that was, there's like 10 of us trying to live in one house. I think Brian and I were sleeping under like the dining room table or something like that. Like,
Yep.
actually somewhere in the middle of that, Brian and I got married, and it was just it was whirlwind, kind of
Mm-hmm.
crazy, kind of very tense, stressful,
Sure.
not great for our relationship, I guess, but we got through it. But yeah, so a lot of travel, and we ended up doing a lot of stuff at the universities
Mhm.
in Ohio. Eventually,
Right.
we I don't know. I'm always someone that always looks for the most effective, productive use of my time. So there were certain things that we were doing that I was just getting very frustrated with. Like,
Sure.
this is a waste of time. This is not effective use of our time. If we actually want to, really be effective here, we need to go where there's more people. And
Sure.
I know we did a lot of leaflet throwing, like
Cleveland.
bundling up, things, and doing, tossing them in people's yards and stuff like that.
Yep.
But then, yeah, we got into the universities eventually, and we started doing a lot on different campuses, and started having actual meetings and getting people to come and doing classes, and presenting more historical ideas and stuff, as opposed to just the day to day of a campaign to support John Kerry. I think that was also a challenging thing. Like you kind of said, oh, what, we've got to support this guy. Like, that was, it was this strange thing. It's like, hang on a minute, we were campaigning for LaRouche, and now what, we're gonna campaign for John Kerry. Like, I
Right.
know, I know that was a difficult shift for me in my
Sure.
head. But we were kind of part of a movement, and this is kind of what Lyn's directive was, and it's kind of like, okay, well, let's just kind of just trust in the process. And
Sure.
but it was a challenge to try and understand that. But I have a very funny side story from Ohio, because I ended up in court, not for anything political.
Sure.
We had rental vans. We had two identical rental vans, and they were very strict when they said, if anything goes wrong, you need to make sure you get a police report. If there's any damage on the vehicle, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I was one of the drivers on the van, and I'm doing a parallel park, and I accidentally, just scuff the bumper of another car. Like, oh man, what do I have to do? do I get a police report? And it's like, oh, there's just a little bit of paint. It'll probably polish off. I don't think we've done any damage. No, I better do the right thing. I'll have to get a police report. So I ring the cops. Bad decision. So I don't have an American driver's license, right? I was an Australian, so I was there driving with my Australian license. So lovely police officer, but he's like, well, I can't really run your license because it's an Australian license. Anyway, so he goes off and he's trying to figure out what the hell he has to do here. He comes back and he's like, well, I can tell you that Interpol is not looking for you. He said, so I guess that's positive. But then, so because he's come there and he's looking at the vehicle, he realizes that the registration of this rental car is all jacked up.
Yeah.
He's like, this vehicle is not registered. I'm like, what do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I'm really sorry, but I have to impound your vehicle. But meanwhile, so we're in Ohio, but we're still staying at a house in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
And we just lose one of our 8-seater vans that we're traveling in. And on top of that, he says, and I'm sorry, but I have to fine you for driving without a license. And you're going to have to appear in court. He said, now, do you have a way to get home? I was like, well, there's the other van that's a rental van, and they can come and pick us up. He's like, is that one registered? I was like, I don't know. He said, just tell them to come and pick you up. I won't look. So, of course, they come and pick us up. And what does he do? He goes and has a look. And he comes back. He goes, I didn't see anything. He said, but you need to ring the rental car company.
Yeah.
So the car got impounded for 24 or 48 hours or whatever it took. And we get the car back. And, of course, you know, we're campaigning all over Ohio. So by the time my court date comes around, you know, we're 2.5 hours south. Actually, we're at a cadre school. We had a cadre school in the middle of the campaign, and we were down in some place, and, you know, we've been doing long hours and it's crazy. And so we've got to drive. Brian and I drive to my court appearance for driving without a license. And, you know, it's early morning. We're trying to get there on time. And Brian's like, I can't drive. He's like, I am so tired. He said, I cannot drive. So we pulled up on the side of the road. It's like, well, how the hell am I going to get to this court appearance? I guess I'll have to drive myself.
Yeah.
So I drove to the court appearance for driving without a license. Anyway, we sit in court. The judge laughed and threw it out. And it was just one of those funny things of like, oh God, just the things that happened on the campaign trail that were just hilarious. So they were like, well, and they didn't stop me from driving. They're like, you can keep driving.
Nice.
But, you know, probably should get an American license at some point.
Yeah. You remind me of two things. One is that I'm sure the whole, you know, youth movement has like 100 stories of just staying with supporters, right? Staying at a house of some supporter and some whatever. I stayed in South Dakota for a few weeks during the same time, like June 2004. Lyn was still on the ballot in South Dakota. So he came in third. He didn't get any delegates, but it was kind of cool. And we're just staying with supporters, just different supporters. And then like when we first started doing our campaigns in Oregon, we're staying with supporters, Eastern Washington, staying with supporters, like So it was, you're always like staying on some couch, some pull-out bed in the basement, or like
sleeping on the floor.
Yeah, 5 of you on a floor, and you're driving 2 hours to go to some campus that's never heard you, and there's this huge explosion because you're the talk of the town kind of thing. But also cadre schools, that's kind of cool. For our audience that doesn't know, we'd have these weekends. We'd rent out some big like cabin. I think I mentioned it last show, but it was just kind of like a mini conference, right? For a local office would have it, or maybe a couple offices if they're geographically close. And it was a weekend of lectures and scientific demonstrations and like hands-on and singing and like being around. So it was a way you could bring in like your context, people kind of new to the organization, to see, okay, this is more what we're about, right? This is what we do kind of in our spare time is work on ideas and learn how to sing opera and do Shakespeare and that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah,
okay.
they cadre schools were always yeah, they were always great
Yeah.
fun, lots of good memories
Hmm.
in the
Yeah.
different ones. I would love to know where they all were. Like I have varying, mental images from different cadre schools, and it's like, man, I have no idea what part of the country. Like I
Yeah.
think, yeah, there was something in Ohio. I remember going to one in Los Angeles in the mountains somewhere. I just remember us getting told, be careful if you go outside because there's a bear that's been spotted, and
Yep.
just
Yep.
different things, and
Always things like
some
that.
different farm, like some farm somewhere and something else. And it's like, yeah, I have no recollection of exactly where they were, but you know, you
Hmm.
just have all these really good memories from them, lots of good conversations and
Hmm.
challenging topics. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd stay up till, all hours of the morning talking about ideas like way beyond. And that's like, I mean, that would often be a way where people really get hooked. They'd
Mm.
really like see the whole thing because they'd see, I even like, I mentioned, so I had this boss at this pizza shop who like was into Lynn and he kind of led me into the ideas. Like he gave me a couple of things to read. It was more like he was talking me through it over a couple, weeks and months. And then I had decided to join the campaign because he's telling me about this youth group doing all these things, but that's awesome. But in my head, I'm like, as long as they're not like a bunch of psychos, I'm cool. Like as long as I can live with them, because he was telling me about how they live. I'm like, okay, I could do that. And we went to just one day of a cadre school, because like we both were working on Saturday or something. So we drove together, and I saw a presentation by Phil and Harley, and then like they did just a choral thing. But Phil like floored me. It was all political, and then Harley had this whole thing on popular music and the Beatles compared to Beethoven and the Lydian intervals. I'm like, this is awesome. Like this makes so much sense to me. So that's what did it. Like, okay, yep, they're fine. I can live with these people. Like they're kind of weird, but we'll make it work. We'll figure it out. And then so the Ohio stuff, that was more like '04, the election. Was it kind of leading into some of the machine tool campaign? Do you remember that? Or was it that was
Yeah,
maybe a little
I do
later?
remember the machine tool campaign, but yeah, I think that was a little later. So I think we came
Yeah.
back from Ohio, went back to Philly. Uh, I guess the election happened.
Yeah, election happened. Bush got
Kerry
reelected.
became president. Oh yeah.
Yeah, Kerry about
Oh yeah.
about 5 weeks ago, Kerry had this article that like we need to rethink the Constitution because free speech is dangerous. So we maybe dodged a bullet on that one.
Well, they're doing this thing in Australia at the moment about trying to basically control social media and what can be
Sure.
said on that kind of thing. So like the
Europe as
the
well.
Australian yeah, the Australian movement's been quite effective recently on like cash ban because they were trying to ban cash in Australia and they've been trying to shut down all of the bank branches and all kinds of stuff. And there's been massive not petitions, but there'll be like a legislation gets introduced and then it gets handed off to a committee and then the committee opens it up for submissions from the public,
Hmm.
usually without really telling the public that they've opened it up for submissions. But there's a
Sure.
pretty good network of a few different movements that have been working together in Australia, and they've where the parliament used to get like if they got like 100 submissions, that was deemed like significant.
Hmm.
um, but now they're getting like thousands of submissions, and there was something really recently. I think they got nearly like 12,000 submissions
Wow.
in like
Okay.
a 1 week period. It was some legislation, and it's around this thing of censoring all the social media and non basically if you're not an approved media outlet,
Sure.
you can be censured. And it was a 1 week period, so because it was such a tight period, everyone put a submission in. It was like 15,000 submissions in 1 week. So
Wow.
um, yeah, censoring all of that stuff is
Hmm.
yeah, shutting down that freedom of speech and the ability to challenge the status quo and whatever
Sure.
else. So
Sure.
yeah. But yeah, well, after the election, we went back to Philly, And not long after we were in Philly, just Lyn decided, or well, again, Lyn, the decision was made that we needed to have a presence in Washington, D.C. And the Philadelphia youth movement was being relocated to Washington, D.C.
Sure.
That was quite challenging for myself and Brian, because obviously Brian having a daughter located in Philadelphia, and obviously all the travel and stuff made it very difficult. Brian was always trying to get back and, you know, be a father, obviously. So we ended up in DC, and that's where we spent most of our time then. So maybe that was 2005 or something that we moved to Washington, D.C. and started an office in the city, and were there full time. So before that, we used to just go once a week, and we would go once a week. We would go and do, pass out brochures at the metro stops in the morning. And then usually it was a day of going door to door in Congress.
Sure. Yep.
Try and get meetings, drop off the latest weekly edition of EIR magazine, and just harass the hell out of everybody.
I remember it well. Yeah.
But it used to frustrate me. So one of the things when I first moved to Philly is that it'd be like, right, so what aides did we meet with this week? Or what aides did we meet with last week? Whose offices did we actually go to last week? And who do we want to chase up this week?
Sure.
Everyone was like, well, we don't know. We just went in, and whatever happened. So I remember implementing a system of like, righto, let's create a list. Let's, delegate who's going to what buildings, and let's actually make notes of, who the congressional aides are that we've spoken to, what we've talked to. And we started gathering like all of their business cards to get their email addresses, and then we could kind of like spam email them the latest press releases as well. And that was just another avenue of trying to kind of get stuff in front of them and try and get meetings. And, you'd run into congressmen in the hallways or I always loved all the tunnels in underneath the congressional buildings. Get lost in them a few times. Trying to get from the House side over to the Senate and things like that. So there was always lots of different stuff going on there. And, I guess, and this is probably one of the things of the challenge between the youth movement versus, the more senior members in Lyn's team, and us maybe not necessarily being fully conscious of, all of the talks going on behind the scenes, the things that aren't publicly known, but, you had a core group of really important representatives of Lyn that were on Capitol Hill all day, every day, with specific meetings with different congressmen members or their aides. And we weren't necessarily aware of all of what was going on for good reason, I guess. We were there to kind of supplement that and just have a bit more of a show of force. And then we would have those weeks of action where we would actually then bring in people from other parts of the country. We'd have the group come down from Boston, and I think maybe some people fly in from the West Coast, and Detroit, as a local in Detroit. So Detroit would come down for the weeks of action.
That's right.
And they were generally a blast.
They were, yeah. I think I'm pretty sure I was on the West Coast and I came out for one of those. And that might have been when we first met. I can't remember. I mean, it's so much of it's a blur, but it's it was fun. It was a fun time for sure. We had rallies, and we'd all hit different metro stops, so people get our literature coming in. But I do agree, and I share your thoughts on some of the frustrations of like, oh no, we're just getting the ideas out there, everything's good. Like, well, okay, but who are we talking to, and like, what do we do? Like, what's the follow on, and like, how are we going to develop this? It's like we could have 10 people talk to the same person. Like, that's just a waste of everyone's time, because that person's getting burned out. So that's funny. Yeah. And then you were describing.
Well, you go to a congressional office and you walk in and ask for a meeting, and someone will be like, "You guys have already been here today." It's like, no, we haven't. Well, no, not you guys, but
sure,
someone else from your office. And you're like, okay, that's embarrassing, right?
Yeah, I know that feeling well.
Okay, we need to
sorry.
get a little bit better organized here.
And those people are also like in their 20s. They're just like wearing nicer clothes. And you're like, oh, I feel like an idiot. Okay, see you later. Yeah, I was in DC much later, but those problems remained. Um,
Mm.
but and then you were describing before about how like different people like later on, at least there was a process of people from like the West Coast would come in for 3 months, tell you how to do your job, and then at the end of it, at the end of their tour, realize, oh, wait a minute, like this is something different than what I'm used to. This isn't just we're going to go out on the street. This is like it's a different office, a different
Yeah,
goal to like we're trying to impact legislators,
yeah.
among other things,
But
think tanks and
that's all right, because I think in the out in the regions, it was largely fundraising. You had a process of going out on the streets or campuses. So there was a fundraising element and there was a recruitment element. And you'd have weekly political meetings, and there'd be a political briefing, and then someone would give a class either on music or history or something. And so your week revolved around raising funds and making phone calls to contacts and trying to get people into meetings. And Washington D.C. was completely different environment. We didn't really have those weekly meetings that you were trying to bring people into. We'd still have classes. We would still do stuff on Sundays was a big day to do a lot of we'd have mini cadre schools kind of on a Sunday and things like that. But yeah, we were there to make noise. And I guess Lyn used to talk about the mass effect. And I remember it was actually in Ohio when I really kind of understood what he meant about the mass effect, which was that you had to approach it from the standpoint of making people think you were everywhere and try and force people just to start talking about what you needed them to start talking about. So even whether
sure,
they didn't have to necessarily agree with what you were saying or not. And in a lot of cases, it was kind of better if they didn't, because when people disagree, they tend to engage more versus they disagree and they walk past. So it's the contradiction that gets the mind ticking. So
sure.
you had to do something a little contradictory to kind of grab people's attention. And I just remember in Ohio at one point, Lyn was talking about this mass effect, and we started, you started to think a little bit more strategically about what you're doing. So you might send one group to go and hit an event that was an hour away, and another group's here doing an event here, and another group's over here. And, all it takes is a couple of people to know somebody at one other event and talk to one another. And all of a sudden, everyone thinks that you are everywhere. And they're like, oh my God,
Sure.
these LaRouche people, they're absolutely everywhere. And that was our job in Washington, D.C. It was to be in people's face and challenging what they're talking about in Congress. And generally the weeks of action, they didn't just come around as a result of, oh, it's been 4 weeks, it's time for another week of action.
Sure.
It was usually a very specific piece of legislation was about to be debated on Capitol Hill, and we needed to interject with a different way of thinking about that specific topic. So you'd
Hmm.
have 100 people come in, and I remember there was this 1 week of action where we had just kind of planned it out to the T. We knew, because we would get what was it called? There'd be a weekly list go out of every event on Capitol Hill. So
Oh
every
yeah.
think tank event, every press conference a congressperson was having, anything that was happening at the National Press Club, it was just all in one list, like a congressional diary or calendar or something. So we would sit there and we would go through that list and highlight anything that was of relevance and note down that into another list. Okay, we need to have people at those events. And,
Hmm.
we're going to hit all of these metros in the morning, and then we're going to hit all of the other ones in the afternoon, so that in one day you could hit every single metro station in Washington, D.C. You could hit every event that was relevant to the topic. And
Yeah.
yeah, I remember Debbie Friedman giving us a briefing like during that week of action one afternoon, and she's like, "Oh my God, like whatever you guys are doing, like keep doing it because they think that there's 1,000 of you. Like,
Yeah.
meanwhile, it was 100 of us, but it appeared that there was thousands of us because we were just on every street corner. And we really weren't. We weren't ever there simultaneously. It's just that we
Sure.
strategically planned out where we were going to go. And yeah, I always enjoyed that when you get that bit of feedback. You're like, yes,
Yeah.
I think we're
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, I
But
remember I was at some event in Boston with Chuck Schumer was giving a speech at the Kennedy School of Government, and we just like asked like it was just like just normal Q&A, but we asked the questions like we were able to get I think like 2 or 3 questions in, and we always would say like oh I'm with LaRouche whatever, and Schumer responded like we had like he made the comment like the LaRouche people, there's probably only like 5 of them in here, but they're taking up 70% of the questions. Like that our effect was always like that. We always were punching above our weight in terms of how many people we had. And so that was funny for people to see, I think, because it was cool. Like we could take over an event real fast. We could take over a discussion. And a lot of it was because to your point, we're interjecting the idea, the thing that a lot of people wouldn't want to say, but there's kind of on their mind. And we would just be the ones. We had sort of a comedian effect in that way. Like we're saying the thing that's on your mind, and we'll just say it. And now you can talk about it because we broke the mold, whatever. We broke it open. So it was fun for that, because it was just we were right or wrong. We at least were like honest with what we thought. This is our view of it. We're not doing it because we're getting paid. We're just doing it because we think that's what's real,
That's right.
So, yeah.
Some people got more enjoyment out of those interjectings at those meetings than other people. But
100%.
some people would go in and be like really nervous and really terrified and be really brave and stand up and say something. And then you had other people in the movement that that was just kind of like the thing that maybe fed their little ego on the side kind of thing. They were we had some people that like to schmooze and things
Sure.
like that. Like in Washington D.C, there was always events and things that went on, and you had certain people that would like to try and go to those events and get a bit of free food and kind of rub shoulders with people and
Yeah.
and whatever else. But that happens everywhere. But there's definitely lots of events.
Maybe you've heard Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson?
Yeah.
He's a popular figure. He's kind of like Lynn in a lot of ways. He's a Canadian psychotherapist, and he's big on like the podcast circuit. He's wrote some books, and but he talks about Jung and Nietzsche and the Greek thinkers, and he's very intellectual, and he's got anyway. Not trying to sell him, but he talks about some of the like let's imagine like the leftist who goes onto some college campus who like breaks into a lecture and like just wants to denounce the professor because they're not denouncing whatever. Pick your poison from whatever issue, right? And he talks about it as like moral grandstanding. It's like I'm better than you. So like I think with our stuff, you sort of had a spectrum, right? Some people are more into that side of things, your point about the ego. And some people more like I'm nervous as hell. I hate this. I don't feel like qualified, but I'm just trying to get this idea out. So you talk about it. Like there's a spectrum, and I hated them, but I did them. Yeah, but yeah, there was for sure elements of that kind of stuff, and so, I mean, some people were a good match of like they're just actually good at it and they're doing it,
That's right.
like not because of ego, but they're just like, hey, you're our heavy hitter, so you're gonna go there.
Off you go. You're up.
There was
I
one
nominate
guy,
you.
I won't mention his name, but it's funny, I did this whole podcast about Merchant of Venice, but a common one we love back, I never did it, but people would love it, was like the pound of flesh. And it was this way that you could show someone and you could make a point that like they're just butchers or like they're genocialists or something. And a couple times, some of our youth movement were able to like sneak in a pound of meat and like
Oh my God.
and like slap it on the podium, like here's your pound of flesh. Like it's so dramatic. And
Oh gosh.
yeah. I'm not naming names, but that was a go-to move. The go the go-to move is a pound of flesh.
Oh wow.
Yeah. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Okay,
Somewhere in
so
that DC stuff was the you raised before the question around the machine tool.
yeah,
I can't remember where that. Maybe it was somewhere at the end of the Ohio campaign. No, I don't.
to me, like it kind of dovetailed. This is a very hazy memory, so it's like
Yeah.
0506 was the machine tool. Um,
Actually, I think it had something to do with Dick Cheney because they sold off. When they sell, they were selling off. Well, I remember the whole thing around where a lot of the machine tools from the car industry and stuff that had been shut down were kind of getting sold off on the equivalent of eBay. But
yeah,
then there was some policy where because part of the national security policy required that the government basically like almost had in storage certain machine tools
sure,
that in the event of an emergency
yeah.
or war or something, you had the equipment. And there was something, I don't know whether there's something that got changed in that policy, but obviously somewhere in there was, the car industry and stuff were
I think it was, yeah,
being decimated.
I think that's 100%. I think there was also stuff with financial solvency of some of the auto companies too. So there might
Yeah.
have been some. So for our audience, machine tools are the machines that build the machines. So we talked a lot about like, the World War II mobilization to switch the auto manufacturers to, wartime material. And our point at that time was, at least the positive side of it was, let's save these machine tools. Don't let them be scrapped. Don't let them be sold to China, which is, I think, a lot what happened.
Mm.
But let's retool them, like reconfigure them to build things like nuclear power, like in modular nuclear power reactors, high-speed rail, like they're
Mm.
machines that can build anything. So why not machines that build the machines to build the things? And I remember there's a can. I
Yeah.
wish I can remember the whole. I think it was Dennis who came up with it, but machines that make the things you use. And but it was clever. It was really clever.
Yeah, and you would
Canon.
you would hear because once it come around, it was like you could hear a machine tool shop just
Yep,
hammering out parts in the background.
it was great.
Yeah, I have to
Yeah.
find that
At
canon.
some point, I'd love to have like an appendix of all the canons or like videos of people. Like it would be so fun to have that, I think.
I feel like somebody started that somewhere.
Sure. Well, if anyone
Maybe
hears this,
Lewis or yeah.
that sounds like a Lewis thing.
It does.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes. That's
I feel
awesome.
like someone
Yeah.
started one somewhere, but
Yeah. No, I'm sure. Yeah. If anyone hears it, reach out to me. I'd love to include it somehow. And it is a shame we didn't get videos of some of that stuff, like the cannons we'd sing out in the streets. Like, and this is, it's like a lot of it's pre-YouTube, so it's, you can only blame us so much for not having thought about a revolutionary technology. But yeah, it would be great to have some of those. But what are you
it
gonna do?
would. It would. Um, yeah. It's even in the days when we started doing the videos, the weekly, updates. I remember doing the on the ground reports from DC and stuff like that. But
Yeah, yeah,
we still didn't have phones that had video cameras in them. It was a
sure.
handheld camcorder that you then had to physically, well, we had to either go back to the office and upload
Yep.
the file to the FTP site or something like that, or
Hmm.
someone happened to be there from Virginia that was going back to Virginia
Sure.
that afternoon, and they'd physically take the video down there to edit it and put it online. But
Yep. Yep.
the yeah,
Yep. I was on both
whereas
sides.
today,
I was on both
such
sides of that one. I know. You
that's
just stream it. Stream it now.
right. Still live footage. But yeah, we had a week of action. I think, I don't know, we had a bunch of representatives from the automotive
Yeah.
industry come to DC,
Hmm.
and there was, all these meetings had been lined up with members of Congress
Hmm.
because Lynn obviously, yeah, had a policy around retooling. I
Hmm.
don't remember what it was, but yeah. So they came in to sit down and put that policy on the table with the different members of Congress.
Hmm. Yeah, I
I
remember
could
I
tell you
was,
another little funny story from one of those.
yeah,
Very, very random side note.
sure.
So I was taking these guys around to these different meetings, and you participated in the meetings with them. But one of the guys, because I was an Australian, he's like, "Oh my god, you sound like Nicole Kidman. I love your accent." He actually convinced me to record his voicemail message on his phone for him.
Uh-huh.
He's like, I just want your voice on my phone message. It's like, oh, whatever. Righto, I'll do it. I have no idea who that person was now. My
Yeah,
memory doesn't serve me well enough. But yeah, they were really good people. Like, that people that were involved in industry and understood the importance of obviously just machine tools and the capability to produce and manufacture as a nation. So
hmm,
they understood how, like, the insanity of the policy just to let it all shut down
sure.
and just, yeah, do
Yeah,
nothing literally to try and save it or protect the
yeah.
nation. So
Yeah, I might have been there for that one. I just remember like going around with like all these union leaders, labor leaders, because they're like, look, this is going to affect everybody. If we, even then, and I think unfortunately it's gone the wrong way, but yeah, like if we deindustrialize, you're just losing all your economic power. And I think, yeah, we still continue to deindustrialize, and it's a shame. We were, but we were right on that one for sure.
that's right.
Yeah. Okay, so
And you
then
guys you're still shutting down. I'll tell you a story about that later, but yeah,
yeah,
shutting down machine shops in America. But
yeah. Okay, so you're in, how long are you in DC? Um, I know the years blur.
I was there for years.
Yeah, I know you were,
Um, um, I don't know what year Brian and I moved back up to Philly. We would have been down there for 5, 6 years,
wow.
something like that. It was a long time. We moved
Yeah,
offices multiple times. I've moved that many offices in Washington D.C. Like, one
yeah,
time I tried to drive the U-Haul truck, because I'm just used to driving past the house of the congressional, like, I can't
yeah,
remember what
yeah,
the name of that road is, but I'm just used you just drive through there, right? So I'm in a U-Haul truck and I try to drive down in front of the congressional building. Of course, security's out
yeah,
there,
sure.
stops you. They're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't drive down this street, should I? They're like, no, you really shouldn't. You need to exit. Like, I was like, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. At one point, our
But we had
office,
a we had an office right on right around the corner from the White House.
yeah, I worked at that one, like a
Yeah, right.
kitty corner from Treasury.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I walked by, I actually showed my daughter the other day, like a couple months ago. I was
Oh,
like, yeah,
nice.
Daddy used to work in that building. It's kind of fun.
That's right.
One of our offices was burned down. I want to say it was like '04 in DC because it was coincident with like Sergei Glaziev was running for prime minister in Russia, and we were like
Yeah.
he was friends with Lynn, and it was somehow it was tied. Like I don't
Mm.
know if that was just our narrative or something, but they burned it down. And then were you at the one? Were you at the office in DC that was above the gay bar?
Yep.
That was pretty funny. Around like 3 p.m. It's just like you're, you're like, all
You'd
right,
be you'd be in the middle of, like, working on some beautiful piece of, Bach or Beethoven, and then next thing,
now.
guys, you're breaking the rules. You're not supposed to start your music. I don't know how many. I remember going down there and having to walk
Yeah,
through the bar and go and find. God, I want to say the owner's name was Mike.
that
I don't
sounds
know.
right.
There's two guys. They
They
were they
were
were they were nice. They
they
were
were
nice
nice guys.
guys,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's like, can you just turn the music down for a little bit longer?
yeah,
And
and
meanwhile, they're like, would you guys just go home for the evening? Like,
yeah. I know, I know. Come on, I know. It's always a tension. I think that was the same one. It was across the street from that church that where they had the like the gold Hummer and all the limos. Because it was like
yes,
it was northeast DC. Yeah, so like northeast of the legislature. You walk out the street and you could see the Capitol building. I think that was the one.
yeah. I feel
Maybe
like we're
I'm
on, like, North Capitol Street or something, like,
something like that, yeah.
something like, yeah.
But then church and it's like it's kind of a lower income area, but then the
Hmm.
church, like every if you were there Sunday, you see this progression the procession of like I think the pastor drove a gold Hummer and had like limos of like his whole train coming in. You're like, this is this the image we anyway, it's just a funny side note. But Yeah. Okay, and then so you were in DC for a while, and then but eventually you came over to Percival. Um,
Yeah, we went back to Philly
Philly.
for a while. Brian and I moved back there, and then we tried to recruit a couple of other young people. We had a couple of people there with
Mhm.
us, and we were doing, just stuff at the universities and trying to recruit and have meetings and things
Yeah.
like that. And then we used to travel up to Boston. So every now and again, like once a month or something, we'd go up to Boston for a week to participate with a much larger
Yeah, yeah.
youth local.
Yeah, yeah.
That was quite fun. And then yeah, somewhere out of that, Brian ended up in Percival on
Hmm.
the animations team. And yeah, when he went to Percival, I went back to Washington,
Okay.
D.C.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think
Very nice.
we were talking earlier, but like, yeah, like I left Percival and then Brian came. So us three were always like never quite in the same spot. And then like once
That's
Brian
right.
left, I think he went back to Philly or DC. I can't remember. But I
Brian went back to Philly, and then I went to. Well, then we shut down the DC office, is what happened.
that's right. Yeah.
We actually shut down the DC office. I can't really remember. We were just struggling to maintain a presence. DC was never an easy place
It was
to
extremely
kind of
hard. It
organize.
was extremely
Yeah.
hard. And it's
You
yeah.
had to be tough every day. You had to be ready to cop abuse every day. Um, I remember copying abuse all the time. And I remember there was this one congressional staffer that would abuse me every time he saw me. And we had,
Yeah.
it was just like a funny thing in the end. But their problem was that I was an Australian. It's like, go to your own country. What do you care? You're not even
Yeah.
an American.
Yeah.
Um, and I would just give it back to him. But you had to develop a really, really thick skin. And
Yeah.
actually, I guess another funny story or something that ties this into the drama work that we were doing, and my very good friend Robert Beltran, and the time that he devoted to the LaRouche movement, because while we're doing classical music and science and history and studying Gauss and
Hmm.
algebra and things, we also had that element of classical theatre and
Hmm.
a classical mode of acting. And Robert, I don't really remember the story around how I think he came across the Fidelio magazine somewhere, and that's what kind of
He
got
saw
him.
public access. He was watching public access TV.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was because we used to have there was like one or two dudes in our organization that like one of their main jobs is just sending VHS tapes to all these public access stations like around the world so that our whatever conferences and stuff would be broadcast. And one of them happened so Robert Beltran, the actor, just happened to see
Wow.
it one night. He was like, "Oh, this." It was something about a new culture or something, and like it was inspiring. And then he called the number and ended up talking. Well, not even the specifics, but yeah. Anyway, that's how he met us. Yeah, I think I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure.
It'd be something like that. And
Hmm.
then yeah, obviously he started working with the guys in Los Angeles, I think, first
Hmm.
around coming in and teaching acting and working on. I think he started. Well, no, they did a Julius Caesar. I
Julius
think
Caesar.
is one
Yep.
of the first things that they did. The first couple acts of Julius Caesar, and
Yep.
they actually performed it at one of the national conferences.
They did. They performed like
Um,
the first two acts, I think. First two or
yeah,
three acts. Yeah, but it was good. Like it was. I was
yeah.
there. I was there in person. I was able to work with him a
I
little bit on Julius Caesar, and it was
Yep.
a profound experience for someone with no background in that. But I was just the act one, scene one cobbler, and it's very yeah, it's a very silly kind of like out there character, but it was good for me. And he like for whatever reason he just like harped on me, and that became kind of the focus. And at the end, I'm just like bawling, crying because it's so emotional. And I remember one of my good friends in the movement, his brother was there just visiting, and like he just happened to come in on that session to see this. And then I'm walking out, and he goes, "Man, I feel like I really know you, man."
I've seen the real you.
I know.
Peel back the layers of the onion.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But
Well,
Robert
I
was working with you
remember.
guys, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't. he started working with us when we were in Philadelphia, and then when we moved to DC, he continued working with us. And we, at some point, yeah, we were doing the Julia. We must have started with the Julius Caesar stuff as
Sure.
well. And but I remember, so there's this other one of the other offices that we had in Washington D.C. There's this little room, and it had like this kitchen that we didn't really use, and a back door. And I don't know, we're working on Julius Caesar, and we were doing the scene with Calpurnia and Caesar, where Calpurnia's had the crazy dream that Caesar gets killed when he goes to the Capitol, and
Sure.
don't go forth today. They're going to kill you, and she's hysterical. And so I'm playing Calpurnia, and I'm a very controlled person, and
Sure. Yeah.
don't like to be out of control, kind of thing. And Robert's like, no, no, you've got to lose your shit, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's it, because I had my hair tied up. He's like, that's it, take your hair out, scruff up your hair. He's like, I want you to go out there, and he said, you're going to come running into the room, and you need to fall on the floor. And just that scared the shit out of me. I'm like, no way, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're going to come in and you're going to fall on the floor, and then you're going to try and get up, and you're going to use the wall, but you can't get up. So you're going to kind of get up halfway, and then you're going to fall on the floor again. And he's like, righto, that's what you're going to do. And I remember going out into this other little room where I had to run in from, and I was just standing there going, oh my God, what am I going to do? How do I get out of this? And there was a door to the outside, but it's never been opened. I was standing there contemplating, like, I wonder if I could open this door and just exit the building.
Yeah, sure.
So that I don't have to go through with this, because I was just, and obviously there's other people in the room, because it's a masterclass style training that he was doing with us. And obviously Robert wasn't there in person. We were doing it all over video. We obviously had that technology at that point in time, but I think we didn't have you could do video. We could never get video and audio to work at the same time, so we'd like have a mobile phone or something, or a speaker phone, as well as a video camera. It was always some weird ad hoc setup that never worked quite properly.
Every time.
But that's right. But anyway, I took a deep breath, and I ran in, and I did what Robert asked, and then he was like, righto, now do this again. And I think between the fear and then actually going through with it, it was completely liberating.
Yeah.
And I remember we were campaigning against Cheney and Bush at the time, and we had a Dick Cheney costume and a George Bush costume and stuff. So the next day I went out and I put on a Dick Cheney costume, and I groveled on the streets in front of the White House and in front of Cheney's offices and stuff. And, if it hadn't have been from Robert pushing me to kind of go through that wall of fire, I wouldn't have gone and done that. And it ended up, I had the best time pretending to be Dick Cheney on the streets of DC. We'd have a great time, but it was just so out of character and not something that I was ever going to put my hand up to do. But
yeah,
there's many, many different moments of, Robert just kind of pushing you out of your comfort zone that little bit further to make a breakthrough, and it would change you as a person.
Yeah, that's beautiful description of it. I think that's a microcosm of a lot of, critiques aside, right? We haven't really been critical too much, but just the positives for like an individual young person coming into this group, right? Like the kinds of challenges it presented and the kinds of growth that people went through, I think is really, really a beautiful thing, because just where else do you see it, like self-help stuff, or like people on their own just attaining certain challenges. But this was all within context of like, we're trying to change the world for the better, and so that's like that positive, that really in a lot of ways loving. Different people have different motivations, of course. I think the people that I saw stick with it longer were more people that had that sort of love as the basis, like there's a positive reason we're doing this, so we owe it to ourselves to challenge ourselves to become this better version of ourselves, wherever that ends up taking you, in or out of the organization or anything like that, just how are you developing as a human being? And drama was like
And then
such
to
a
be
such
able
a
to go out there and challenge other people to be
sure.
better than they think they can be as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. And the drama was like a particularly beautiful little piece of that, I think. And
Yeah.
that was just, I mean, funny because it's just this guy who's a great guy who just happened to cross our public access, and he really was like he was just like supporting us in general. And then the person talking to him, who I don't need to name drop, was like, "Hey, do you ever want to do anything with drama?" I was like, "Okay, sure, let's talk about it." And then ends up being
Yeah.
this whole thing for us. So it was pretty cool, pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Very amazing. I remember being at a cadre school that, Robert came to a couple, but this one in particular, and I don't know, he just his ability to see through people's personas
Yep.
and the walls that they put up, and different people that would get up. He's like, oh, kind of get the sense that you're a guy that nothing really bothers you at all. Like you just everything's just going to roll off your back. And he would he picked Brian for having been in the army.
Oh,
Like first time he met Brian, and we were working on a piece, and he's like, you been in the army, like just the rigid kind of so
sure.
he'd just be able to kind of like he had all these insights based on what people were giving him, that he
Hmm.
could just kind of tell certain things from their background, and then he would just challenge and push and pull and just get people to expand their capability. And it was always beautiful to watch. I always loved working with Robert, but also watching him work with anybody else as well.
Yeah.
Then you had great people like Antonella Benardi that came and did work with on the singing. And
Hmm.
I always remember both Robert and Antonella kind of basically saying like, look, I may tell this person one thing, but that doesn't mean that that exact same thing applies to you because you're in a different place. You're giving me something different. So I'm working with what you're giving me. You are you. You're the instrument. This is you. So just because I tell that everyone's kind of going to get a different instructions and directions because we're all at different stages and different processes of development. So
100%. Yeah. I think, yeah. Do you ever get a chance to work with Maestro Briano?
once,
Okay.
I think once in Boston.
Okay.
So I don't know whether I did actually. I think I got to watch him work
Okay.
with a
It's
group
still
in
you
person.
you get a lot just
Mm.
watching it work. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. Yeah, we must have been doing the conferences in 2006 at least, because that's when uh myself and one other were leading our course in Seattle, and they sent us down to LA for the conference to work with Briano.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and it was a week. Yeah, it was awesome. It wasn't a conference. It was just we worked with them for a week. We rented some church in LA, and we just were there like all day, every day. Some people would
Yep.
go organize for a few hours, and then you come back and you'd work and you'd study, and it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they did something similar in Boston, I think. We
yeah.
went up and yeah, that's right. You'd go and organize and you kind of do a bit of a tag team thing and
Hmm.
rotate everyone through to get to participate. So
Hmm.
yeah, pretty cool.
Okay. Well,
I also remember on the streets of DC, so talking about Dick Cheney, we actually had a retirement birthday party for him
okay.
on the streets of DC.
Hmm.
We had birthday cake and chips and party hats, and we actually had people would come up and eat some cake. And I don't know,
Yeah.
that ended up being one of the we did a lot of kind of street theater stuff in DC
Hmm.
because you were always dealing with very stiff people that was very hard to kind of get an in with. So it was generally humor and music was the best way to try and have an effect on them. So
100%.
but yeah,
Yep.
somewhere there we shut down the DC office, and that's when I ended up in Percival.
You remember what year that was? Ballpark?
No,
Okay, yeah. Because I'm pretty sure that's the only time we were like in the
hopeless.
office together, I think.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
But I can't remember what we had going on. I think we were, yeah, I mean, obviously film production and the TV
Mm.
shows. I was working on more of the film and the website stuff, I guess. I did a certain number of the
writing
daily
videos.
shows. Yeah, videos. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I did a bit of daily shows, but then yeah, I
Remember
remember
that?
writing. I remember you doing the stuff on Pearl Harbor.
Hmm.
Um, different ones. I did stuff around the Reconstruction Finance Corporation.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. The
There's
World War
there's all the
II.
yeah, there was the Nawapa stuff that
Hmm.
Michael was working on. I remember working with him on the script and trying to present the text in a good way. And um, gosh, what else were we working on? I remember writing a thing on Jacques Cheminade
Oh, yeah, yeah.
uh, on a quick research project on that, and that was always fun. You'd have these. I remember researching Jacques. I didn't really know much about him, but we were putting this video together, and I think I just it was like I locked myself in a room for 3 days straight, and you could just get into this zone of kind of just trying to write this story and pull it all together,
Hmm.
and then palm it off to somebody else. I remember working with Chance. Oh, we did
Hmm.
something on Nero. I remember doing a video on Nero with Chance.
That's right.
Um, something else.
So that must have been in the Obama
Yeah.
years, probably.
Yep.
The Obama,
Yep.
yeah. That was a common
Yep.
comparison. Yeah, sure. It's funny. Yeah, and then when did you end up going back to Australia?
Um, 2015.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So I was still there then, I guess. I just have a bad memory.
I feel like you had started part-time work
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
around the time when well, actually, no. See, I left Percival and went back to Philly.
Okay.
And I was doing a lot of the social media stuff. So Twitter,
That's
not
right.
Facebook, but all the Twitter stuff.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
So I moved back up to be with Brian and Kaylin, and then I would go and do some stuff with the New Jersey office with
Hmm.
Diane's campaign and stuff that they had doing there. A couple of trips to Boston. I do a bit of organizing with the guys from Philadelphia, but I struggled with standing at a post office um, with nobody coming. You'd have a couple of people that might come past in a day or whatever, and
Sure.
after being in Washington D.C. and like you're always chasing the crowds and trying to have as big an impact as possible, I really struggled at these post office sites, and you just have such long periods of time and there's no one around, and
Hmm.
it'd be like I'd be standing there reciting Shakespeare or something. I'd take sonnets with me and memorize them while I was
Sure.
waiting for the next person to come by,
Yeah.
but
I think we
but I
got
ended up, I was like, I'll spend more time. I spent a lot of time on Twitter and things trying to spread what we were doing. And we were doing like paid advertisements and stuff with a bit of social media.
that's right.
I
That's
was
right.
running that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think we got like part of, talking about staying at post offices, that we just got into these old modes of like, well, this is how we've always done it, and like certain practical limitations would present themselves. Like, okay, well, maybe this office can only deploy at these types of places, but then it just became kind of stale, and like we didn't really have the resources to like move out of it, like you can't just move an office, so easy or something, right? Um,
Mm.
and then maybe our forces were depleted too. A lot of people had kind of left at that point. Um, just that's local specific in some way, but also we had some of those structural issues. Not being too critical, is just like trying to give the benefit of the doubt, but also some of it's like we just couldn't adapt to some of the new stuff. I don't
Mm.
know. There's a lot. I mean, we try with the social media. We of course attacked social media early on, and then later admitted that was a mistake. And some of our critiques are still valid. I think they're still coming
Mm.
into play nowadays with if you have an intelligence agency taking over a social media platform, which is documented now, us and other groups, it's like other countries do that, we do it too. There's pros and cons. But when you have that kind of capability, then can you really control, the free flow of information, or is it more of a control platform kind of thing? And that like we had that critique then, and it's played out. It's come true, it's been confirmed. So yeah, that's one of the issues, but
Mm.
yeah. But anyway, I think I don't know if you have other things you want to talk about, but I feel like we're kind of coming to a close of it in a sense.
I think
Um,
the only other thing, one of the things that we had access to when we were in Percival was Lynn. You know,
yeah.
the much more of a direct relationship with LaRouche himself. I know I had the opportunity to be on his security team. You know, we'd have obviously the people that would go and do night shift and stuff at Lynn's house, and you'd get to have a chat with Lynn in the kitchen while he's making a cup of tea or different things. And I also got to participate, on his security team at events. So I remember going to a diplomatic event where Lynn would be hosting a discussion with a bunch of diplomats, and
hmm
you got to see a bit more of that immediate behind the scenes relationship of things. Actually, there was a couple of things. I also remember there being a dinner with a couple of diplomats. We were at like a Chinese restaurant or something, and
hmm
can't remember. Yeah, there was a group that was there. It might have been actually, it might not have been diplomats. It might have been congressional members.
Yeah. There's a
So
couple.
you just got to see the more of that direct relationship with the people that on Capitol Hill that were involved in a lot of policy making and stuff, and the fact that we as a movement did have that kind of backdoor discussion. People wouldn't openly admit to the fact that they were meeting with LaRouche
Oh,
or
sure.
having discussions, with LaRouche's representatives, but those things were taking place all day,
100%.
every day.
That's a great point. And like, yeah, if you look at just, obviously the press coverage of LaRouche is super slanderous. I mentioned it last time, or it's just misinformed or mistaken. But like, yeah, we had tons of support that for people that would just never come out publicly. And like at a certain point, we didn't care. And some people like, have courage or whatever. Like, okay, sure, like maybe they're not as courageous or whatever as you'd like them to be, but we had a ton of support with things like that. Yeah, I never went to those events, but I definitely was around Lynn a lot, at his place. And I was thinking about it the other day because someone messaged me privately, just talking about like, the idea of like a cult thing, and we're I'm not prepared to start that discussion right now because it's a long discussion, but in terms of Lynn himself, he lived very humbly. He had like a modest house. They had a big property more for like security concerns, I think, and also because they had a farm there. And I was never on a security team, but I was with him at dinner, twice a week, discussions with him 3 times a week. I've talked to him on the phone several times. Like he called me, I called him about different things. Um, and it'll come out more, but like dude, he's a human being. He had his problems, like any human being, but like, dude is amazing for what he was. And if you had the chance to meet him personally, he's a fascinating guy, and yeah, beautiful guy. Very, very concerned, very thoughtful, uh, brilliant, and yeah, interesting.
And I think always trying to find the thing to push someone a little bit further. Like you would see someone within the youth movement that might have was struggling,
Yeah,
and he would try to, instigate a project or, challenge them to pursue one of their passions.
yeah,
He yeah, he was very loving from that standpoint. He was always challenging people to do more, to be better than what they ever thought they could be.
hmm
And I know, I guess I know when you on your last interview with Tristan, where he's kind of like, well, hang on, what is the thing that ties all of these different ideas together?
sure.
And I think Lynn's always been driven by this question of agape,
hmm
and the question of what it means to be a human being, and that we're all a human being, which means we can all strive to be more beautiful souls. I guess that
hmm
comes from Helga as well, but I remember that always being one of the things that, you've got to, the only way to challenge I don't want to say an evil society, but the
Sure.
bad culture is to represent the alternative,
Sure.
that we have to embody the alternative. And that's one thing that Lyn always did. He was always trying to challenge and pull something more out of a person. I remember talking to him a couple of times about different things. One was about Brian, because Brian left the organization, and
Mhm.
then the all of the weirdness that comes with that, with
Sure.
someone being in or out, or whatever.
Sure.
And then the position that put me in of, oh, well, hang on a minute. Can you have contact? Can you not have contact, kind of thing? And I remember actually just having a discussion with Lyn about it at one
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, he's still your husband. You need to figure, he's like,
Yeah.
so where other people are giving you shit,
Right.
right? And we're like, well, I'm going to just go and have a conversation with Lyn about it. And he's
Yeah.
like, he's your husband. He's a human being. Like, his view was not the view that I was getting from all of these other people around us. And
100%.
there was another time too, obviously being from Australia, I would try to travel home and see my family like once a year or once every 2 years, kind of thing. And I remember one Christmas, Lyn's like, we don't, there's some big campaign, we've got to do this, and people don't switch off for the holidays, kind of thing. And
Hmm.
meanwhile, I had a flight home to Australia. I was going home for
Sure.
2 weeks, kind of thing. And then
Sure.
everyone's trying to tell me, you got to cancel your flight. You got to cancel your flight. I'm like,
Yep.
I don't think so. But hang on, let me ask Lyn.
Hmm.
And his response was, "You need to go home."
Yep.
And I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
He's like,
Right.
"You need to go home. Go and
Yeah.
visit your family."
Hmm.
So a lot of times, people would kind of interpret different things that Lyn would say and then be adamant that this is exactly what he meant. And then,
Sure.
you'd have a conversation with Lyn about it. And, we had the same thing. We had fights around Robert Beltran, because Lyn was saying that, you can't do, you know, doing theatre within the organisation, doing drama work, without Robert was a waste of time and should be shut
Sure.
down. You shouldn't be doing it.
Sure.
So then you had people arguing that we couldn't do the work with Robert
Right.
because he wasn't physically in the room.
Sure. So
So
stupid.
you'd be like, so you'd ring Lyn and you'd be like, man, Lyn. And I remember this was a week of action. This is a funny story. Week of action. Had all these people come in, and one of the things that we were going to do one of the evenings with the week of action was a session with Robert Beltran, so that
Yeah.
people could be there and watch it and participate, right? So some people got upset with that idea and rang somebody, and something else happened. And next thing, Lyn gets on the phone and gives us all a briefing that afternoon. And he just attacks drama work in general.
Hmm.
And we're like, holy shit. Actually, no, I think Robert was physically coming to town
Uh-huh.
the following week or something. So we're
Yeah.
doing this session, and then he was going to he was like flying into Washington, D.C. the next week. And I remember straight away after that conversation, after that briefing, Brian and I went and sat in the car and like rang Windy Hill, and we're like, we need to talk to Lyn like right now to
Yeah.
clarify what the hell that just meant.
Yep.
And then, we briefed him on what was happening. He's like, no, there's nothing wrong with that.
I
Like,
know.
he's like, you should be working with Robert. And it's like, oh my God, like
I
what's
know.
going on here?
The hard,
So it's,
it's like,
miscommunications and things like
sure.
that. But
The hardliners, and I was a hardliner in certain things, but like stuff like that.
same. I've got some moments which I probably regret.
Sure.
There's certain
Yeah.
certain things that I'm like, oh, I was definitely wrong there because I just followed a line
Sure.
without thinking it through myself.
Yeah, you feel a pressure and like you think it's the right thing and you think that like being tough on it makes you better, right? And like we've been there. I think
Mm.
most people in the organization were there at some point, and some of us had different positions of like authority, so like it carried different weight. But most of the time, like the longer I stayed in, the more I realized like with those hard lines, especially getting the opportunity to be around Lyn and seeing how he thinks and like seeing that he's not really a hardliner. Like on certain things,
Mm.
sure, but like more about the principle. But like those hardliners and their default of like go to the cynical, go to the negative, go to the prohibitive, like no, this wouldn't work. We can't do this, yada yada. Like this, the more the black and white. It's like, well, these things are nuanced, like who would ever, think about Lyn's relationship with Robert. It's like Lyn's never going to say, don't work with Robert. Like that's
Mm.
never going to be a thought in his head. Yeah, don't work with that guy who's like has transformed our organization with respect to drama work and all that. So it's so silly, it's such a to me it's
Mm.
looking back and um malice towards none, right? At least I hope. But it's so silly to think about those things, What a
It
silly way
is.
to
There's
think.
just funny, yeah,
Yeah.
funny things that happen at different times. But
Yeah. And I had a couple different more like interpersonal relationships and then like talking with Lynn about it. And Lynn's like, no, don't do that. Do this. Like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Of course. Like that would be, a normal human being in any other circumstance would make this decision. Why am I thinking something different? So yeah.
yeah, you just get trapped.
Mhm.
Trapped by other people's thinkings or trying to keep someone happy or something,
Yeah. Yeah. Doing it because you think you should versus doing it because like you honestly think you should, doing because you think other
Mm.
people think you should, I think
Hmm.
is part of it. But yeah. Anyway, I think I don't know, I feel like we have a good shape to it right now.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you're welcome back if you have more thoughts. I mean, I'm sure we both will. You brought up
Yep.
before a great idea, which is to have like a little round table for some of these things, like
Yeah.
um, talk about different offices or different like campaigns. Because so far, I mean, we just glanced over some big campaigns, but that's better. It's still a net positive, right? Let's say no one's talking about these things. It's all very useful, but it's been lovely. I really appreciate you coming on, Joanne. Thank you very much for
No
coming
worries.
on. Yeah.
Thank you for doing it. I want to encourage other people to get on. And it's funny because I know when I saw your post on Facebook, and then I saw, obviously a couple of kind of negative or, people trying to tell you don't do this. But I think the thing that jumped out to me is that it was like what I saw in your post. I could immediately recognize as, oh, this is Spencer. This is the passion to capture history, because that's what that's the passion that I saw when we did get that time to work together in Percival, right? It was, the passion around Franklin Roosevelt and just the history of, the Kennedys. I guess that's one thing that you and I have shared is, this
Yeah.
this passion around Franklin Roosevelt, the Kennedy brothers, and that kind of time period. And so when I saw your post, I saw that as that's just Spencer.
Mhm.
It's that desire to capture something that hasn't been recorded, and I think people need to see that for what it is. It is,
Sure.
we did all these really amazing things. It has not been documented.
Mhm.
We haven't had the opportunities to talk about it. Most people, if you've left the movement, you either try and just forget about that part of your life because it is so hard to integrate it into
Mhm.
your current existence, because you may not have somebody that shared, it's that shared experience. It's like when you think about the band of brothers, or the guys that come home after the war, or one of the things that comes to my mind is Arthur Miller's All My Sons. It's the son that's been to war. He had all of these principles, these profound concepts of fighting for one another, and fighting for a bigger mission, and then returns home, and nobody else understands this passion or this drive that he had. And so it becomes difficult for people when they leave the movement. They don't have the opportunity to express these ideas that played such a huge role in their life. And I think everyone should be proud of the time that they spent in the LaRouche movement, and the fact that we all still carry those ideals with us. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of former members that are very, very negative,
Sure. Sure.
and that, they find it easier to attack and go after whatever negativity they can find. But that exists in society as a whole. Like,
Mhm.
I work in a business with my brother. We have employees that come and go.
Mhm.
The employees that have left will tell you every bad thing they could possibly tell you
Sure.
about the business to try and justify the fact that they don't work there anymore or they don't want to
Mm-hmm.
be there. But you just have people that live life on the negative side,
Mm-hmm.
that look at the world from negative colored glasses kind of thing. So, that exists everywhere we go. But we want to look at, the things that we did. We played a role in all these different campaigns. There were great moments. We made a lot of really good friends, and their stories, obviously, Spencer, you and I haven't talked for
10 years,
10
probably. Yeah.
years or
10
more,
years. Mm-hmm.
and we can just have a conversation now, like it was yesterday kind of
Yeah.
thing. So
100%.
it's a shared experience, and I think people should have the opportunity and the courage to share that experience. I would love to hear more people's stories.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's exciting.
I'm excited too. Like I seriously am like excited. I was excited when you agreed to come on, but I'm excited for hopefully more to come on and share it. And just I think it'll keep inspiring people. But what you just said was a perfect way to end it. And yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to think about it. And that's thank you for the compliment too. Like I'm glad you saw me and like no other ulterior. Like no, this is just we have to tell the story, guys. Like. And even like right after
And you are a storyteller as well.
Thanks.
Like,
Thank you.
like I said before we started this, when you went and did that job as a bus driver, you wrote the story of the different kids and the different personalities, and it's that joy of being able to tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
You want to try and capture the essence of the moment. We'll never be able to capture all of the truth or the facts of ABC, but you look at someone like Shakespeare, it wasn't about capturing the factual evidence, it's about capturing the essence of the time and
Poetic
what
truth.
went on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. All right, well, yeah, great way to end it. Well,
thank
thanks.
you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're welcome back anytime. Thank you so much for joining us today, Joanne. Thanks.
Take care.